We light up the world. We light up the world.
Welcome to Fire to Inspire, the podcast. I am your host, Angel Yasmin. Today's quote is, "Shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you'll land among the stars." When I discovered this quote, it resonated deeply with me because lately I've been saying over and over in my spirit that the sky is definitely not the limit. Like a couple of months ago, I kept saying that it's not the limit. And one day I looked up and I was, working a charity event for iHeart or whatever. And I just knew at that moment that I wanted to see what was beyond the sky. And I see the sky, I look up at the sky, but it's what's beyond the sky that I look for. I'm so elated to welcome our very special guest, who is one of the world's leading motivational speakers and top-selling authors in America, and is a man who I believe needs no introduction. His name is definitely a legacy. My ultimate goal today is to feed your mind with unique ways of positive motivation that will empower you to shed excuses and unlock your greatness. Today, you will learn the importance of thinking differently, achieving your goals, and creating a powerful personal vision to guide you on your way. I'm so grateful, and it is a true honor to be in your presence. Let's welcome Mr. Les Brown.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you so much for answering the call on your life to be fired up to help people to live their dreams and get a larger vision of themselves.
Absolutely. Well, we're so happy to have you today.
Thank you.
And we're just so blessed that we're going to be inspired in a big way. And guys, take out your pens and your paper, take some notes, and we're going to fire away.
Oh.
So when did you become, and I mean become, Mr. Les Brown? What was that moment for you? When did you believe that you discovered that you were the one?
It's a process, and believe it or not, it was a few months ago, and it was going back to Miami, and I was there to help and assist a brother that was running for governor, as I was doing here in Atlanta with Stacey.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other speakers who went up to speak before me. It was at a community college. And there were all kind of activities and conversations going on. And when I went up to speak, everything stopped and people got quiet. And they listened to me at a deep level. And I said to myself at that moment, wow. I started hearing the first voice that told me, you have a unique voice. But as long, and I'm starting off my 75th year on the planet, and I've been doing this now this year, 50 years. So faith comes by hearing and hearing and hearing, but that was the first time. It was not the external confirmation. It was the internal confirmation that my voice is unique and that I do have impact on people and people listen to me.
Yes.
But for 14 years, I didn't do what I'm doing now because, and that's why I said it's a process, that faith and belief is dynamic and you grow into that calling, that something that you were chosen to do. I believe that we were created on purpose, with a purpose, for a purpose.
Amen.
And I believe that my purpose being on the planet is to help people to get out of their head and get into their greatness.
Ooh, that was amazing. So most people go through living a lie that has been told about them. And I learned through you that 86% of self-talk is negative and goes undetected by the conscious mind. How can one reprogram their mind from the negative conditions that they've been taught in the past?
I'm glad you asked that question. When you wax a floor, one of the first things you do before you put new wax on the old wax, you have to strip away the old wax, okay?
Right.
So I encourage people to use some programs that I've created. They can go online and see Les Brown speaking in the Georgia Dome, which no longer exists. I'm speaking before 80,000 people.
Wow.
And it's called It's Not Over Till You Win.
Mm.
And another one called You Deserve.
Mm-hmm.
You get this on YouTube free and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And another one I have called Getting Unstuck. And as a result of listening to them on a regular basis, there's a process that, and I now train speakers. It's time for me to pass it on. You learn, you earn, you pass it on. And so the products that I've created, they do three things for a person. One, it helped them to get a vision of themselves beyond their mental conditioning and their circumstances. We live in a world where we've been told more about what we can't do rather than what we can do. And when you live in a dominant culture that is designed to destroy your sense of self, you have to create a process to strip away everything that you've picked up negatively about yourself in that culture. Number two, then that's breaking the cycle of the mental conditioning. Two, decrease the level of unconscious self-loathing that caused many of us to settle, to go so far, and then just stop unconsciously. And we don't even know why, because if you ask most people, if you had your life to live over again, could you have done more than what you've done thus far? Most people, being honest, will say yes. And why is it that we don't do it? It's because of the programming that has been instilled in us that we can only go so far because of policies and practices that we've had to go up against so many times, and then pretty soon you just surrender to that. And the third thing is to increase our sense of worthiness, so you come to believe that life is God's gift to me, and how I live my life is my gift to God. And so when people listen to those videos, and we have several others on an ongoing basis every day, to program your mind, because if you don't program your mind will be programmed. Being in the culture, there are things that you're just going to pick up, and you can't avoid it unless you have a program yourself where you carve out time that you say, this is my time for me to go within and to begin to restructure my thinking. Be ye not conformed to this world, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's an ongoing process.
Wow. Thank you. Yes. So you quoted, too many of us are not living our dreams, but because we're living our fears.
Yes.
And I'm guilty of that. But now we're all trying to step out. This is why they're here listening in. We're trying to step out. They want to break away from the bully of fear. And how can one develop courage to pursue their dreams beyond their comfort zone?
The key to that is continuously, number one, becoming clear about what is it you want. There are things that I wanted years ago that I no longer desire those things. There are things that were important to me years ago that once a doctor looked at me and said, you have cancer. Those are three most feared words in 7 different languages. And so after those words, there are things I used to be concerned about. I'm not concerned anymore.
Right. Nothing else matters now.
No. Right. So that's why we have to constantly go back to evaluate where we are and what's important to you, what matters to you. And so the next thing is, once you become clear about what it is you want, then the next step that is major is your willingness to make a radical change to become the kind of person that you need to become in order to achieve that goal beyond your comfort zone. And why the goals beyond our comfort zones are important is, in order to do something you've never done, you've got to become someone you've never been. And so there's a radical change that must take place. We've got to die to who we have been to give birth to who we are to become. And so in that process, there's a new you that shows up in that process, the willingness to risk. Viscott said, if you're not willing to risk, you can't grow. And if you can't grow, you can't become your best. And if you can't become your best, you can't be happy. And if you can't be happy, then what else is there? Absolutely. And so that process, reaching beyond your comfort zone, reinventing yourself, and holding a vision of who you see yourself being, living the dream as if it has already been. We call forth those things that be not as though they were. And the reason that we have to tenaciously make a conscious, deliberate, determined effort to hold the vision, to see ourselves already achieving the dream, is because our thoughts have magnetic power. I was calling a friend the other day, and he was calling me at the same time. We've all had that experience. But most people never achieve their goals because of what I call weapons of mass distractions, the interruptions of life. And as a result, they don't have a vision that they are holding. Years ago, the comedian named it was Flip Wilson. He said, "What
Oh.
you see is what you
You
get."
get.
You know, the Dramatics had that
Yeah.
song too. What you see is what you get. So most people don't have a vision of what it is they want, and they are just surviving. They're just existing. It's been
Ooh.
said that most people die at age 25 and don't get buried until they're 65 because they don't have a clear vision
Mm.
of what they want out of life and who they must become and the things that they must do to reinvent themselves to step up and create a new journey for themselves in this thing called life.
You know what amazes me about you
What?
right now, that you laughed at your scars. You said you went through cancer and you laughed
Yes.
at it. That's how you know you've grown
Mhm.
past yourself. You know that you're bigger than yourself. And
Yes.
I'm very proud of you for doing it,
Thank
because a
you.
lot of people can't laugh at that.
Yeah.
And I know cancer has been in and out of my family. That demon is in and
I'm
out.
a 27-year
Wow.
cancer conqueror because of God's grace and mercy.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
My
amazing.
doctor, he had a great sense of humor. Dr. Alfred Golson, he has since made his transition. He said, "You have cancer." I said, "Can you give me a second opinion?" He said, "Yes, and you're ugly too."
You did not say that. Did you say that?
Yes, come on, man. Yes. And we both cracked up.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, but you have to
Yeah.
laugh at your
Oh, you got
opposition
to.
sometimes, because if you
Listen.
don't, it'll kill you.
Without any
You know?
question. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It'll kill you.
And it helps you also to put things in perspective because we have the ability to deal with things. And what happens is that we give those things, those events, those experiences, those circumstances more power than they deserve. I say to
Ooh.
people, when you're in what appears to be an impossible situation, that you don't know enough about yourself to be a cynic, that there is more power in us than we give ourselves credit for being. But most of us stop ourselves. There's an African proverb that says, and I love it, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm.
You better preach. That's all I got to say. Drop the mic. Drop.
Do you know the primary difference between what I do and what ministers do?
Please tell me that, because I want to know that.
Good. Ministers preach the gospel about Jesus.
Hmm.
All right? Every Sunday morning you hear all the songs. Jesus saved with the utmost, Jesus saved. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they preach the gospel about Jesus.
Right.
I preach the gospel that Jesus preached. They sell the messenger.
Now you just spoke
I
to my
sell
soul
his
when you said
message.
that.
Yes. No, he's not a cosmic bellhop. That's why he said to
Ooh-wee.
the disciples who were amazed at the miracles that he performed, "These things ye shall do, and greater things shall ye do." So my goal is to help us to be on the path of doing the greater work.
Wow. So that means you were called to reach beyond the walls of the church, of the religion.
Absolutely.
And
Only
that's-
15% of people go to church.
Right.
That's why when T.D. Jakes wrote the book called Reinvent Yourself, that was the first book where he had as the author T.D. Jakes, not Bishop T.D. Jakes, because his goal was to reach the other 85% as well as speak to the 15%. And so in order for us to make it in this global economy where the late Peter Drucker calls the era of the 3 C's, accelerated change, overwhelming complexity, and tremendous competition, he said that what we must do is unlearn, learn, and relearn. That's where we are now, because things are changing rapidly. So while people are sitting back and singing, "Jesus saves," okay? It ain't that kind
It's
of party.
just not, it doesn't stay there. It doesn't need to stay there.
But they don't
you
know.
know?
It's a hypnotic spell that's been passed down in our culture from generation after generation. And a great illustration of this is that fleas are born with a physical capacity to jump 18 inches high. But if you put fleas in a can 10 inches high and you watch them, they'll jump up and down, up and down, up and down. If you listen, you hear them hitting their heads. Leave them for a while, they'll jump up and down, and they won't hit their heads. Now, here's what happens. When you take the top off, when they have baby fleas, even though those baby fleas are born with the capacity to jump 18 inches high, the baby fleas, because of observation, because of the things they see and the things they hear, they jump just below 10 inches. They won't jump out, even though they can. And so we've been held back for generation after generation after generation And as a result of that mental conditioning, that this limited mindset, this limited vision of ourselves, you can't fit a big vision into a small mind,
Ooh,
that
come on
we
now.
we are not reaching for the things that we now have access to. We fought for access, but there are many things that we're not taking advantage of because of the fact of this limited vision that's been passed on down generation after generation after generation.
Yes.
So the products that I provide, the trainers that I teach, is to help people to have an experience of themselves, that one that will begin to give them a larger vision of themselves beyond the mental conditioning and beyond their circumstances, and to live out of their imagination rather than their history.
You know, it's so funny that you say that. And I'm so glad that you said it right here on this platform, because I'm a PK and I'm a believer. I love God with all my heart. But at the same time, I'm the youngest out of 5. My mom and dad are pastors. My brother's a pastor. And they would always say, "Oh, Angel, you're next." And I said, "Nope, don't give God any ideas. That's not the life I want.
Yeah.
I want to reach beyond the walls and touch other people outside the church." Because honestly, what can you do with people that just goes to church and not see something else outside the walls to help other people?
Yeah, you had
that
a
you
larger
can't serve
vision.
that way.
Yes, and so you weren't willing to settle in. And, you know, we say, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And we have the highest poverty level in the church.
Talk about
We
it.
have more churches
talk about
than
it.
we have businesses. And so, and it's about mental conditioning. That's why it's
Yes.
been passed down. That limited belief system and vision is passed down. It's a part of the culture, and the key to what we must do is that what I call that interruption, like Paul had on the road to Damascus. We have to have an interruption that allows us to stop and to think and to refuel and to recalculate. When you're in the car and then you put that GPS and you make a wrong turn that says recalculate, it's time for us to stop and to recalculate and say, "Hey, we can do more than just focus on living after we die.
Right.
Behold, the kingdom of God is at hand." And that we can live right here, right now.
Right now.
And so what we need is hope, because there's hope in the future that gives you power in the present, and methods that allow us to prepare for and to create the kind of life that we want.
Now, you mentioned that earlier we were all created on purpose with a purpose.
Yes.
And I love when you
for
said
a purpose. Yes.
Absolutely.
There's something we're supposed to do. That's why God chose you out of 400 million sperm. You are a masterpiece because you're a piece of the master.
So 85% of people who reach their goals, it's because of their attitudes, you say.
Yeah, yes.
And their
They did a
vision
study,
about themselves.
They did a study of a group of entrepreneurs and millionaires, and they wanted to know what was the common denominator among them.
Okay.
85% did so because of their confidence in themselves, their attitude about life and how they saw life. 15% because of their aptitude. And so what's important for us now is to focus on the things that we need to do to strengthen our vision of ourselves, because once you give a person a sense of purpose and a strong sense of identity, that gives their lives a sense of direction. And once your life has a sense of direction, the self-destructive strength things like drugs and alcohol and living a small life won't fit. There's something about you that you have said to yourself in your heart of hearts, "I don't want to live like this. I believe there is more." There's a 26-year exhaustive study by Dr. Martin Seligman called Optimism, and Learned Optimism. And in his book, he said, between the ages of 0 and 7, we develop permanent personality characteristics and behaviors. Between that age, we determine what's available to us and what's not available to us. That's why the Jesuits say, "Give me a baby and I'll give you a man or woman at 7." So that process, that environment that you come into during that time, the conversations that you hear, the things that you see. It's a very impressionable time. Kids can learn 2 and 3 different languages during that time, between 0 and 7. And most of us just surrender our kids' minds to watching television as opposed to being intentional and cultivating in them a sense of self and expanding their vision to the things that they can be if you are successful and working with them to see a vision of themselves beyond being a rapper, beyond being an athlete or an entertainer, but they can be an endocrinologist, they can be engineers or cardiologists. But that kind of culture is intentional. The Asian culture, they do it. They're very intentional about their kids' vision and what they see and what they hear. And they're molding kids for the future. While many of us surrender our kids to an entertainment-driven culture. So you see things on television that you know clearly that Dr. King and Malcolm X didn't die for that kind of foolishness and vulgarity and low-brow thinking and profanity. You know, I teach kids that profanity is the strongest expression of a weak mind.
Ooh, teach us today. Teach us.
Yes.
So what advice can you give those about rejection and failure?
Rejection and failure, they're myths. When you fail at something, it's because of what you don't know. I used to be a state legislator in Columbus, Ohio. When I got legislation passed, I was able to pass that legislation because I was able to, because of what I knew, to argue the proponents and the elements in my bill successfully. But when I lost the debate, I lost because of what I did not know. So I had to go back to the drawing board. So the key is to ask yourself, when something you've put together, a game plan or a presentation or an idea or a business, and it don't work out, you have to go back and look at it and say, what happened? What is it I didn't see? And you have to incorporate other people's thinking. Einstein said, the thinking that has brought me this far has created some problems that this thinking can't solve. And so you, I believe, ask for help, not because you're weak, but because you want to remain strong. And ask for help and don't stop until you get it, so that you can have some breakthrough thinking to convert that setback or that failure into a victory.
Wow. Whew. So there are so many distractions.
Yes.
And we were talking about that earlier, even just being in Atlanta, you know, that keep us bound from our highest potential. So we look around and everything's so noisy, fast-paced, and in an uproar. And we can't even sit around a table with our families without looking at our phone, catching the phone if it rings, and not bringing it back to where it really matters. And that's just love.
Well, the thing is that we have more instruments of communication, but we do less communication for the most part than we should be doing. And so the key is to determine what kind of environment that you're going to have. So when I have dinner with my children and my grandchildren, I say, well, there will not be any telephones at the table. We're going to look each other in the eye and we're going to communicate and we're going to talk about things. So you have to be intentional. See, we can't control the thoughts that come in our minds, but we can control the thoughts that we dwell on. And we can control the environment that can interrupt the family conversations, or we can shut them out intentionally, make a conscious, deliberate, determined effort that the only conversations that will be engaged in are the conversations that we initiate around this table, not because there's a text or there's an Instagram or there's a phone call. You have to create it deliberately.
Yeah. People just need to learn how to focus now. We're just all over the place.
And that's once again,
you know?
that's a choice.
Yeah.
That's a choice. And the reason that most people are all over the place is because of discipline. You know, Shakespeare said, the undisciplined life is an insane life. And so we have to discipline ourselves to be single purpose, to be a single mind focus. What is it you want? What must you do to transform yourself? Ask yourself on a regular basis, am I on the path? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Am I stressed out because I've made somebody else's problem my problem?
Ooh, that's deep.
Okay? And so when we are consciously living our lives from a place of being aware. Where am I? God asked Adam, where are you? Not because he
Mhm.
didn't know. God is omniscient, all-knowing,
Mhm.
omnipresent, evenly present everywhere at the same time. There is no spot where God is not. But he wanted Adam to think. And what happened was he lost his focus. He was interrupted. You know, the original sin is a desire for something other than God. And so
Ooh.
when you allow yourself
Mm.
to be distracted from your purpose, from the things that you do. One of the things that I don't do anymore, I used to think I was multitasking. And I was at a lecture where the Dalai Lama was there. And a guy asked the question, how many of you multitask? And I was among people who raised my hands gladly, you know. And he said, that has such a negative impact on you to the extent research has shown it impacts you negatively as if you had smoked 2 pounds of marijuana a day. I
Whoa.
said, whoa.
Whoa, that's
I don't
like
even
being hit by a
smoke.
truck.
Come on. I said, okay. Yeah, so now we
Wow.
have to be present.
Uh-huh.
You have to be present
Yeah.
with your family members, with your
Yes.
friends. You have to be present with what it is you're doing. You can't master something if your mind is going in two different directions. An unstable mind is man who has a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways.
Ooh,
and so
wait.
we have to be focused on what we're doing to achieve a level of mastery, because average is over. And so we have to find a way to find something that's our passion, something that we put the time in, the perseverance, the patience to master, so we can stand out into the marketplace.
Wow, that's incredible. And no, you know, my favorite moments is when I get my nephews together, my nieces and nephews, and they're young now, but I
Yeah.
get them together intentionally.
Yes.
And I say, we're going to do family time.
Yes.
And they know I love family
That's a
time.
good thing.
And I say, no phones. And if they pull it out, I say, put that phone up. And they take me seriously. Now, they don't
Yes.
listen to me on anything else.
Yes.
But when it's that movie time, that's our time.
Yes.
And that's what I will always remember, that moment, those moments.
Yes.
Because,
and they will always remember that
Right.
too,
yeah,
because it's there
Right,
in the
you're right.
subconscious mind, which never slumbers and never sleeps.
yeah,
They'll remember that.
they will. And one of my nephews is mad at me now. And he's like, you don't come home anymore. We don't do family time. So he just kind of gives me a little attitude. But you're right. He subconsciously remembers that all the time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. So you just published a new book titled Unlock Your Greatness. Such a healthy title, by the way.
Thank you.
I love it. But what is the message behind your book?
The message is that you've got to be willing to experiment in life. There's so many things that we have the ability to do, but
Mhm.
most of us have been programmed through a culture where we go to school and we have been trained and groomed to be employees as opposed to becoming employers, entrepreneurs. And this is an era where we're now living. We're living in a historic time, a major transition where we are headed toward a time where it's the end of work. And what I mean by that, there's a book called The End of Work, where that the majority of the jobs in America in less than 5 years, that will be done by robots, by artificial intelligence, and by computers. And so now you have to have a larger vision of yourself. Now you have to face the reality that the 40-40 plan is gone, where you can go to college, graduate, get a job, work for 40 years, doing the same thing, and leave and get 40% of your salary, which wasn't enough in the first place. According to the Department of Labor, over 20,000 people are losing their jobs every month. And so now you have to ask yourself, what is it that I bring out to the marketplace? And even while you're working, you have to create a side hustle, something that you can do. So when they tap you on the shoulder and say, we're going in another direction, or if they tap you on the shoulder, that they did my sister Sharon, who lives here, and say, hey, look, I know you've been doing this for 22 years. You've done a good job. We're bringing some people in from India, and we're sending your job to India, and we want you to train this person. And they knew she's going to have an attitude, and everybody in that department. And then she said, they called a meeting and said, hear us clearly. If you don't train them effectively, and we will know, we will test them. If you don't train them effectively for them to do their job well, you will not get your severance pay.
Oh,
So they trained them very well.
I know.
Okay,
I bet they did.
yes, and so it's like being married to somebody, and they tell you they want a divorce, and ask you to train their replacement.
Oh, God.
Oh, behave.
Ooh.
Okay, I mean, she was angry, but they did it.
Mm,
And so this is a brand new day. It's the
Yeah,
rise of
it
the
is.
robots.
You're right.
And so what we have to do is to accommodate that. We have to be flexible. We have to be versatile and adaptable to live life and deal with it as it is. Figure
Mhm.
out what is it I need to do and find a way to win.
Wow. As we leave this conversation, I want the people who are listening to leave with this on their hearts.
Mhm.
What are some encouraging words that you want to leave the audience with that will help them ignite the fire within?
If you want to make it in life, you got to be hungry.
All right.
Those who hunger
Yes.
and thirst after righteousness shall be filled. People that are hungry are unstoppable. People that are hungry believe, always strive to get on life and on top in life because it's the bottom that's overcrowded.
Right.
People that are hungry, no excuse is acceptable. People that are hungry make a way out of no way.
Absolutely.
They have non-negotiables.
Mhm.
If you're casual about your dreams will end up a casualty. You
Mm.
got to be hungry. People that are hungry are unstoppable. People that
Amen.
are hungry take no prisoners and eat the wounded.
Ooh.
I think that's the only way I got here, being born in an abandoned building on a floor
Mm.
in Miami, Florida, in Liberty City, not
Yeah.
knowing my parents, being labeled educable, mentally retarded in the fifth
Mm.
grade, put back from the fifth grade to the fourth grade, and failing again in the eighth grade at Booker T. Washington High School in Miami. The only way that I was able to speak in over 51 countries or 80,000 people in the Georgia Dome when it existed
Mm.
and speak for major corporations around the world. I was hungry.
Yeah.
I spent time reading 3 to 4 books a month because I was hungry. I disciplined myself to memorize 3 to 5 quotes a day and study
Ooh.
various elements of the self-development industry that I could spontaneously get up and give a speech and custom design it for the client, because the speaking industry is focused on the philosophy of the Dale Carnegie course, which is a good course. They teach, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And so when I'm looking at how do I stand out, my mentor, Mike Williams, who wrote a book called The Road to Your Best Stuff, he said, in all thy getting, get understanding. Conduct communications to find out what is it they want. Don't let what you want to say get in the way of what your audience wants to hear. And develop a speaking style that can create an experience. In addition to information, if information could change people, everybody would be skinny, rich, and happy. Create an experience. Oliver Wendell Holmes said that once a man or woman's mind has been expanded with an idea, concept, or experience, it can never be satisfied to going back to where it was. So that's what the products that we provide and the training that we provide for life coaches, for speakers, and for people who want to be messengers of hope.
You have definitely lit this room on fire.
Thank you.
And we're just blessed to have you today.
Thank
you so much for joining us. But I want to make sure that they know where they can find your book online.
Yes, they can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
And also our website is lesbrownglobal.com, lesbrownglobal.com. And people who have an interest in finding their power voice and want to become messengers of hope and want to change lives and build a multi-million-dollar business, this market is wide open. They could email me at lesbrown77@gmail.com. 7 is my lucky number.
All right.
I was born February the 17th, and I'm one of 7 children. Joshua marched around the walls of Jericho 7 times. Naaman, as you know, dipped himself in the river Jordan 7 times. Did I tell you, 7 is my lucky number?
I see.
lesbrown77@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this party with a purpose. And make sure you subscribe and review. And we'll catch you next week.
When they strike, we light up.